Hello, welcome back to our podcast, 102.9 SLICKS FM, joined once again by Mr. Dave, the Racing Line Ellis. Dave, how are we?
Doing well. Look, I was doing 2 podcasts in 2 weeks.
We're back
It's
on it.
I know. It's
Back on
it's
it. We
like,
had a small pause.
we did. You need to get over these issues when you're starting. Now we need to be back on it, kinda
Yeah,
weekly or whatever.
we had a month break, which killed all momentum that we made up. So we're back on the train.
And I don't think we're giving us much time to edit this one before it's released either, is it? Because this is the Le Mans 24-hour episode, and as we record this, it is noon UK time on Wednesday, which means in 1 hour, free practice 1 starts.
I was going to say it's starting today, isn't it?
Yeah,
As of
we've
recording.
we've already had free practice for the support events, so yeah,
So there'll
the
be a quick
event has
turnaround.
begun.
Yeah. Or it will be a week late and then it'll be relevant for next year's event, but we'll try and get it out.
I don't think the stuff that we're gonna chat about is, like, time sensitive anyway, is it? It's like it's more of an introduction to the event rather than we're
Yes.
not gonna do a rundown of the entries or anything like that, 'cause nobody's interested in that.
No, neither am I. So that's good.
Good, 'cause I don't
Um,
know them.
Good. Do you know much about 24 Hours of Le Mans?
Decent amount. From my side, I've attended on and off since 2003. So my first year there was the year that Bentley won with the Speed 8, which was very cool. And then I took a couple of years off because it turns out I didn't like going through France on coaches. And I re-attended again in 2006. And then did pretty much every year until 2014, 2015. And then not really been back since due to other reasons.
But you've
Hoping to
been
go
at
back again.
least.
I've been for so it's about 10 years or so that I attended it every year. So yeah, I know a fair bit, but when you're trackside, you get a very different vibe to when you're watching it at home. Like, it's very different watching a motor race from trackside and trying to work out, the flow of the race and who's where and whatnot, as you'll know
Yeah,
from being at events.
that's the thing. And it is one of the events I look forward to watching the most. I don't pretend to know much about the entries, but I enjoy it as a spectacle, as it is, pretty bonkers what it is. Oldest active endurance race in the world and part of the informal Triple Crown of motorsport. It's a big deal, and I look forward to it every year.
Yeah, I think the beauty of sports car racing and endurance racing is you don't actually need to know much about the entries. You can go in and just enjoy it as the event. I think when you get to the top end of motorsport, like MotoGP, F1, IndyCar, NASCAR, everybody's expected to know all the drivers and their backstory, their dog's Instagram handle and stuff like that. I mean, you get the sports car racing, you're just like, who is the third driver in the customer Porsche? Nobody knows. It doesn't
That's
matter. But literally, it's fine. That's okay because nobody knows and it's fine. You can just watch it and enjoy it for what it is. And Le Mans is kind of the ultimate version of that. Well, actually, the Nürburgring 24 is probably the ultimate version of that because it's impossible to know all the drivers. So you've
yes.
just got to turn up and enjoy it. But Le Mans is the same vibe. You don't need to be an expert to enjoy it. You should kind of enjoy the spectacle of the entire event.
But as we know, we are experts, so we can enjoy it on another level.
Well, we're experts until someone writes in and tells us that we're wrong, which has happened a few
Well,
times.
when you were saying that, I was already thinking somebody is going to write in and say, "Well, actually, I do know all of the drivers."
Yeah, actually.
Actually,
Yeah, that's gonna be I'm gonna get the tire circumference wrong at some point or something, and
mm,
someone's gonna message me in with the
I still,
exact millimeter
I'm still
diameter.
haunted by the MotoGP episode we did.
No,
Uh,
no, I think that one's still fine. If you're talking about electronics, then that applies to every series, you're fine.
well, there we go. I'll just let the noisy bugger get out of the way. Shush! Stop being rattly. I've been quiet all morning while she's recorded, and then she's anyway. Um, so the Triple Crown of motorsport is informal, but it is the Monaco Grand Prix in Formula One. It's the Indy 500 and the 24 Hours of Le Mans. Where did that come from? Do we know?
Don't really know what the origin was, but it has existed for a long time. Obviously, that came post F1 starting with the Monaco Grand Prix, but I believe that Graham Hill is the only person to have done the
That's
Triple
true.
Crown. And you'll enjoy this one, obviously, being a Fernando Alonso fan. I believe he's kind of the closest person to having achieved the triple, and it's probably still possible for him if he decides to go back to IndyCar and give it a go, because he did have a good couple of runs there. But that has been around almost as long as the events themselves, and it kind of makes sense. There has been arguments in the past whether it should be the Monaco Grand Prix or the Formula One World Championship, because then that changes the discussion a little bit and who's involved. But no, I think the original one was Le Mans, Indy, and Monaco, and they're your three. So yeah, and we had Fernando Alonso be part of that in, was it 2019, I think, with Toyota. Did two
Yes,
wins, 18 and 19, I think it might have been, with
something like
Toyota.
that.
And that was obviously after winning the Monaco Grand Prix for Renault and Formula
Mm.
One. So yeah,
Well, even if we changed it to World Championship in F1, Graham Hill and Alonso would still be
yeah,
in the same position. Um,
yeah.
it's interesting though because in that case, wouldn't it be the whole IndyCar season? Where do you draw the
Yeah,
line?
yeah, that's where the argument happens, isn't it? And some people say, "So Le Mans bigger than its championship," and it's like, well, yeah, that's true. There's a lot more people pay attention to
100%
Le
true.
Mans, but I agree with
Yeah.
IndyCar being like that as well. I know Indy 500 winners. I don't know IndyCar champions as much.
Well, I watched
Formula
Indy 500. I haven't watched any other IndyCar so far this year.
Exactly. So Le Mans is that kind of thing where this is significantly bigger than its championship, but it is actually part of the annual FIA World Endurance Championship as well, which is about 7 or 8 races that are all various lengths of endurance races from, I think it's 4 hours, might be the shortest, maybe 6 hours, up to about 8 hours for Bahrain. And then you got Le Mans 24 kind of dropped in there as well. Hasn't always been part of a championship, but kind of has been in and out, but it's always been the biggest event. It overshadows every championship it's been involved with, or every championship it's been adjacent to over its like over 100 years now. This race is
Hmm.
1923, something like that. You said,
1923. Yeah, that's the one.
yeah.
So
There's always a bit of confusion about, it's over 100 years old, but we've had less than 100 races because it paused during World War II and things like that. So the numbers don't line up.
I think France was a little bit preoccupied during those years.
It was a little bit. They had a little
A
bit
little
much
bit.
to do. Yeah,
Yeah. Let's talk about the Circuit de la Sarthe.
yeah.
Uh,
It's great.
it's quite good.
It's ridiculous.
8.4 miles long,
Yep.
one of the longest in the world, and up to 85% of the circuit lap is spent at full throttle, which is ridiculous.
When you look back through its history, the circuit's changed like quite a lot over the years, but like the basic theme of it has stayed the same. In that there's a huge amount of big long straights. And kind of funnily enough, we've actually introduced faster corners as the years have gone on, because things like the Porsche curves, which are incredibly fast sweeping corners, used to just be a straight line. You used to just come basically almost straight from Indianapolis and Arnage all the way up to what we now call Dunlop curve. Although it's probably changed this year because I think it's changed to Goodyear curve, which doesn't sound right, but whatever. So like
Is that under the
this,
bridge at the start?
yeah, the bridge is now the Goodyear bridge rather than the
Interesting.
Dunlop bridge, which the purist in me really hates, because
It will
the
be
Dunlop bridge is
like
iconic.
a certain social media app that will forever be called a certain
Twitter,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's Twitter. It
it
just
is.
is.
Always will be.
Yeah, yeah,
You can call it
exactly.
what you want.
So
Um,
the circuit's always been kind of mad and kind of ridiculous. The Mulsanne straight down the back, I think it was 1991 was the final year without chicanes, I think, and then they were added for 1992. Might have been 1991 they were added for, I can't remember the exact year. And that was in response to the cars hitting 230, 240 mile an hour in the 80s down the Mulsanne straight and having to be slowed. And Le Mans is interestingly the only circuit of this length that's FIA Grade 1, technically, I believe. Um,
that is
Actually,
a
no,
nice fact.
we're gonna get corrected on that, actually. Let me change that.
You're
It's a
correcting
grade
yourself.
it's a Grade 2, I think, which makes it the only Grade 2 circuit that WEC uses, because they mandate Grade 1 circuits because it's an FIA World Championship, but they will use this as Grade 2 because it can't be Grade 1 because of its length, I think it is. There's your
Okay,
nerdy fact.
there's a
And
fact.
this is the championship that invented things like slow zones and full course yellows and safety car, the kind of virtual safety cars that we've got now. A lot of that started in Le Mans and a bit of Crevetic and a bit of Nürburgring, and we see it in F1 today. This is where a lot of that kind of safety technology came from, because you kind of need these different ways of doing things when you've got a circuit that's 13 kilometers long. Even with safety cars, you can't just have one safety car. They've actually got three safety cars that go in parallel around the circuit because the length is a unique thing to deal with. So you get when you're watching it, you will kind of have to adapt your head a little bit to the length. It's not quite as extreme as the Nurburgring, but it's a similar idea to this isn't Silverstone, this isn't Monza, this is a big circuit running through the French countryside.
Yeah, and it's very different to most other series that are out there because it's not about, fastest laps and things like that. Although that does make up the qualifying grid, it's endurance, it's
Yeah.
reliability, and that's what the track was actually designed to do. It was to test the reliability of cars, and uh, it led to innovations in things like fuel efficiency and trying to spend as little time in the pits as possible. So it's quite different to Grand Prix circuit racing in that sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you go back to the start and the concept was exactly the same now as it is then. It's like how far can you drive in 24 hours? That's it. And then whoever drives the furthest wins. And in that regard, it's about speed, but it's also about staying out the pit lane. It's also about your car not breaking down. It's also about traffic management. So like it is a very different thing to Formula One where you get in and you do a 90-minute sprint. It has changed in the last maybe 10 years or so where it is becoming more of a 24-hour sprint race. The cars are reliable enough now that you can push them for 24 hours. You will still have random failures, but it generally isn't that you've got to nurse the car, you've got to nurse the clutch, you've got to nurse the tires, got to nurse the brakes. But that's what it was for most of its history. So now it can be considered a 24-hour sprint race, but given that you've got 24 hours of traffic management, 24 hours of not hitting the curbs as aggressively as what you would in a sprint race, things like that, it is very different to watching F1 or a touring car race or things like that.
That's it. It's a shared grid, isn't it? So the top class is LMP1. Then there's also LMP2 and GT3. Is that right?
Yeah, so LMP1 is now officially called Hypercar. So
Hypercar.
that, yeah, if you say LMP1, everybody will know what you mean. It's the top tier of prototypes, which now are all factory-backed prototypes. There's Ferrari, Alpine, Aston Martin,
Loads of
Genesis,
manufacturers, isn't there?
Peugeot. Yeah, there's quite
It's
a lot at the
brilliant for
moment.
that.
LMP2 are slightly slower prototypes. They're still pretty quick in the grand scheme of things, but they are slower than the hypercar class. And then GT3 is what it sounds like. They are the GT3 cars that we see absolutely everywhere else. They
'Cause
are
that's what we saw
very,
at the Nürburgring. That's what Max was in.
yeah,
And perfect example of that is he finished 21 hours and then the car packed in. So, he was on for a win and you just don't know.
that's
Reliability
endurance
can
racing.
strike at any time, and that is endurance racing.
And arguably, cars are more reliable than they ever have been in motorsport history, and you still get a lot of mechanical issues. Nürburgring's particularly harsh on cars. Le Mans as a circuit isn't actually that harsh on a modern race car. It's just driving in a straight line for a lot of it. It's not like the Nürburgring where you're bouncing off large curbs and things like that, but there still is a reliability aspect. And as you say, those GT3 cars, it's the same ones we've seen in the Nürburgring. It's the same ones you see in GT World Challenge. Before anybody writes in, we know there's slight differences. They are on slightly different tires. They're using Michelin rather than Pirelli. They're using different ECUs. They've got different balance of performance, things like that. There are differences, but it is essentially at its core the same GT3 cars that we've seen in countless other series. GT3 is relatively new to Le Mans and ACO Racing. They used to have their own class called GTE, GT Endurance, but they become hideously expensive. And it started getting to the point where a lot of teams were just adapting GT3 cars into GTE regulations anyway. So it became too expensive, bin them. GT3 is now here. GT3 Le Mans is purely customer in theory. There's no factory teams in the GT3 class like there was in GTE. Again, somebody will write in and be like, actually, that's slightly wrong. And you're like, yeah, well,
Actually,
it's just funny because you've got Manthey running Porsche 911s, and Manthey are owned by Porsche and run factory 911s and everything else. So is that a factory team? Technically no, but also yes. So when you look at
yeah, it's a fine line.
the when you look at the GT3 teams, they should all be customer teams, but there is a blurry line there. So there's a lot of factory cars in there too.
You said something earlier that got the all the virgins and the unemployed excited. You said balance of performance, BOP.
Oh,
What does
oh,
that mean?
yeah.
Because it's a big
Oh,
debate in hypercar and endurance racing, isn't it?
It is a bit. It's always been a debate, and it's relatively new to the top class of Le Mans. Hypercar introduced BOP in the top class. LMP1 did not have this. Balance of performance, the idea came really from the GT3 class when SRO invented the GT3 class. And the idea was that you just need to get your car into a performance window and they will balance the performance of the car to make it competitive. So that in theory, every car can be competitive over a lap or over a race. Every car can have a chance of winning, and you don't need to outspend anybody to achieve it. Having a big budget doesn't mean, more development. So they will adjust the weight of the car, they will adjust the fuel tank size, they will adjust the fuel rate. So the fuel can flow faster. You can adjust battery output and input, and you can adjust, there was something else as well, and I forgot what it was. But basically, you can adjust power and weight of the car, is the idea. And the ACO will regulate what the power and the weight of your car has to be, and they will move those sliders around depending on how they feel your car is performing. So if you turn up to Le Mans and you're 10 seconds a lap faster than everybody, it's an exaggeration, you're going to get quite a few kilograms added to your car. The result is the racing is actually incredibly close. I think last year was one of the closest Le Mans in history because you had more cars on the lead lap than ever before. Part of that's reliability, cars weren't breaking down. And part of that is because the balance of performance was so finely tuned that everybody was clumped together. The flip side of that argument is it pure? Is it pure racing if you build a better car and then the ACO will just add 20 kilograms of weight to your car and reduce your power output? It's probably not pure, but that's an argument for a very long podcast episode where we'd probably have to bring in lots of people and I'll set that one out, put it that way. We'll get
That's
somebody
where
from
I
each
would bow
side.
out.
Yeah.
I,
But
when it gets that technical and that's where I bow out. I just like to see cars go around. Um, but I understand it. So you can't just have someone run away. It used to happen in superbikes quite a lot. They would cap the revs or add weight and things like that.
yeah,
Um, Ultimately, it's just as much a team championship as it is a driver championship. So if teams are getting suppressed or limited in their, if they've built the better car within that window, then it's a hard one. It's a hard
it,
one to
ha-
manage.
it has been a huge topic in ACO racing because this is the top of endurance racing. So should you balance cars at the top of the top? It's like, well, that's a philosophical argument that people can have. And I'm not here to have that argument. But the way that the ACO have gone about it is maybe not necessarily been the best. So originally it was an automated BOP system where they fed in data and they got information out and they applied that. And they seemed to bin that after a year or two, which suggested it wasn't going particularly well. Now they have stopped publishing the BOP decisions. So the public does not know what the BOP actually is. So what used to happen was before an event, they would publish essentially a BOP table, balance of performance table. They would say the Ferrari is getting this weight added, the Porsche is having this weight removed, things like that. Now they no longer publish that, which is a little bit like, so we don't know what's going on then. Is like, is this car winning because it's lighter now? Is it, what's going on? We don't know. But in true ACO fashion, they didn't manage the changeover of this very well because the way they worded it was basically fans don't understand BOP, so we're just not going to tell them. That's a very ACO thing to have to deal with. Their communication style has never been the best, but they're trying, they're getting there. So yeah, we've got BOP. It is in the top flight of hypercar LMP1. I'm sure people will write in and give us their opinions on it. I'm not necessarily a huge fan, but I understand why it's there because before we had this, we had LMP1 and the budgets were Formula One level budgets for, 8 races. It wasn't sustainable. It wasn't acceptable, really. The class died, and now this is their attempt at keeping a class alive. And even if you don't like BOP, you got to look at that entry list and be like, that's a lot of hypercars in the top class from a lot of different teams, a lot of different manufacturers that are going to be in for the win. So even if you don't like it, there's a good argument that it works anyway. So
So is it 60 cars? Is that 60 across all three classes, or is that per class?
that is 60 across all three classes. Yeah. So that
So
number has gone up a little bit. It used to be 50 back in the day when I started watching, and now we're at 60 as the pit lane has expanded a little bit. So yeah, we are capped at 60 cars. And
it's the
unusually
traffic
for
management that I quite enjoy watching. Seeing the
Gotcha.
LMP1 cars scythe through the GT3s is quite exciting.
Yeah, if you thought Nürburgring was crazy for traffic management, it's like this is even more crazy because it all happens faster. You know, you're doing it at 190 mile an hour rather than 130 mile an hour. So, and the gap between a GT3 and a hypercar is quite a lot as well, especially in corners. Seeing hypercars go around the outside of a GT3 car in the Porsche curves, or even around the outside of an LMP2 car. And having the LMP2s in the middle there is really interesting because the LMP2s don't do the other WEC races. They only do Le Mans and then they go off to Elms and Asian Le Mans series. So having this middle class in the middle, speed wise, is really interesting as well, and throws in a kind of another thing. It's like because how you treat an LMP2 when you come up to lap it is very different. How do you treat an LMP? How you treat a GT3? And you could have a situation where you're in an LMP2, you're trying to lap a GT3 whilst a hypercar is trying to lap both of you. There's a lot of things happening at a very high speed there. So, but I 100% agree. Traffic management is actually the biggest thing for me. I think multi-class racing is my favorite type of racing.
It's the passive aggressive headlight flashing that
Yeah.
gets me.
Yeah, I love
I just
that.
find it
And
quite funny.
it is funny as well because the other drivers know they're there anyway
Hmm.
because they've got essentially a radar system in the car where it's got a reverse
Little
facing
box
camera.
around
Yeah,
the car. Yeah, I've seen that.
it's really, really cool. That was developed by Corvette and Pratt and Miller, and I think it was Bosch back in the mid 2010s. Yeah, yeah. Full radar system, and I think they sold it to other teams as well because it's actually useful for everybody. It's more of a safety thing than it is a competitive edge. But yeah, so they already know they're there. So the flashing the headlights, like you say, is almost passive aggressive. But I quite enjoy that, to be honest. I enjoy watching the hypercars flashing their headlights at LMP2s.
Yeah, me too. Um, it's quite a dangerous event, I would say, wouldn't you?
It's odd, really, because like I consider dangerous events things like Isle of Man and even the Nurburgring a little bit more. But I was trackside when Alan Simonson was killed, for example, and you do kind of get that shock of, oh yeah, motor racing is still dangerous. Like it can still happen. So yeah, I would say due to the speeds, just the pure high speed of it, the fact that the circuit is a temporary road course and that you have mixed class racing makes it kind of oddly dangerous. You've got a unique mix here that you don't get elsewhere. I can't think of any other race in the world that's got cars this fast in a multi-class scenario on this type of circuit. IMSA's probably the closest with something like Sebring, which again is quite unique in how the circuit is. So maybe that. But then you're into the same type of cars and the same type of event. It's just a 12-hour endurance race, just happens to be in Florida rather than France. So yeah, I would list this one as quite dangerous, up there with Nürburgring, not quite Isle of Man TT level, but up there certainly.
And there was the big 1955 incident that everyone references. What was it here?
That was a
So the
Mercedes.
1955 24 Hours of Le Mans, it was the 23rd running, but it was an 81. It had 81 spectators uh, killed, including the driver, Pierre Levesque.
Yeah, his Mercedes made contact with another car coming onto the start and finish straight, which at that time didn't really have chicanes. It was just basically a straight run from Arnage through. So he was doing very, very high speeds. He was catapulted into the crowd on the driver's left hand side of the circuit. Car caught fire. I think that car was one of those magnesium chassis cars, so the fire was quite vicious. And as you'd imagine, 1955, you didn't have quite the safety infrastructure that you have now. You didn't have quite the infrastructure for even dealing with that amount of casualties. So they made the decision to keep the race running and leave the race going because it was actually easier to deal with the casualties like that. Because if you'd stopped the race, a lot of people would have tried to leave the circuit. So it actually made their situation slightly better. And that was Mercedes pulling out of motorsport for a very long time after that. And then,
Unsurprising.
unsurprising, and
I'm
then
reading
they
here
were,
as well, Switzerland and other countries banned motorsport events. Switzerland didn't even lift the ban until 4 years ago, 2022.
yeah, which gets you into questions about the Sauber Formula One team and the origins of them because they're Swiss based.
That's a good
Also,
point. I hadn't thought of that.
and I think originally Formula E might have been the first series back in Switzerland after the ban was lifted as well. So yeah, like the reaction to that incident was massive. But it was 1950s motorsport. You know, it was eventually going to happen. It just happened to happen at this race. It's kind of like when you see videos of Group B stuff and you're like, oh, somebody is definitely going to be killed here. And then the worst happens. Like what everybody's expected to happen happens. That's kind of how it was at Le Mans in the 1950s of it was going to happen eventually. And eventually it did happen. Very, very different circuit now with very different safety attitudes.
Cars had no seat belts, it says, which,
Quite often they didn't have roll bars though. So it was kind of like
yeah,
the karting idea of sometimes it's safer to be thrown from the car than be strapped into it rolling around, which works in a go-kart when you're doing 15 mile an hour. It doesn't work when you're doing 150 mile an hour
yeah,
from
it says
Arnage.
here, the drivers reasoned that it was preferable to be thrown clear in a collision rather than be crushed or trapped in a burning car. The logic's lovely. However, at those speeds,
The
it's a
logic's
different
lovely,
story.
but like often when their idea of making safe cars back in the 50s and 60s was they didn't have an understanding of crumple zones, so you were strapped into a solid
You were
block.
the crumple zone. Yeah.
Yeah, so in that regard, well, maybe it was safer to be thrown from a car like that. But not at 150 mile an hour, it's not, because you're going to hit something else. And then, you're still the crumple zone just for something else.
Yeah. It was, so I'm just reading. Yeah, I'll cut that.
That's right.
So
That
more than
also stuck.
80 spectators were killed by flying debris or from fire. A further 120 to 178 injured. It's remained the most fatal crash in motorsport history.
And hopefully will remain the most fatal
Yes,
crash. Hopefully we
we
never
don't,
top
that's not a
that one.
record we need to beat.
No, and that was what started Mercedes' pullout of motorsport for a very long time as well. Mercedes did not compete in the majority of motorsport in official capacity for a very, very long time after that. They did return to Le Mans in the late 80s with Group C cars, and then again in the 90s with the CLKs and the CLR. And then created probably the most famous accident of Le Mans, where Peter Dumbrek takes off he's on the rundown to Indianapolis for his particular accident. His Mercedes CLR is following a Toyota GT1 over the crest and takes off and flies into the woods on the driver's left-hand side, which makes it which was the third time that car had flipped that weekend. Not that particular in one car, but three of the CLRs flipped that weekend, resulting in Mercedes pulling out of the 1999 Le Mans 24 hour whilst competing mid-race. So Mercedes kind of, unfortunately, part of the two biggest accidents in Le Mans history, I think. Or two
Yeah,
most
not,
famous accidents in Le Mans history is maybe most
it's not
importantly.
a record you want, is it?
No, it's not. And they still have not returned to the top class of Le Mans since then. They are in the GT3 class with a couple of AMGs, which is nice, but they've still not returned to the top class since then. I think Total Wolf said that they would actually be interested, but they don't want a POP class, which is back to the POP discussion of it. Does it keep
Yep.
some manufacturers
All
away?
roads lead to BOP.
It does, doesn't it?
It does. So do you feel like Le Mans is sort of biding its time and similar to Nürburgring, similar to the Isle of Man, which we'll talk about later? Do you think it's part of those groups of tracks where the legacy is what's carrying it, even though it's undeniably dangerous and risky? And what do you think? What's your take?
I think Le Mans unique in this case in that actually I don't think this one is biding its time because the amount of changes they've made to the circuit to make it more acceptable is quite large. Like in 2003, when I attended for the first time, they had just built the S's just after the Dunlop chicane, called Forest S's, I think. A huge amount of runoff there, and same at the Dunlop curve, and they've reprofiled a huge amount of the circuit. Even the corners themselves that haven't changed have been retarmacked in different ways. They've got rid of crests in the road. They've got rid of crowns in the road. There's larger runoff in a lot of areas. They've got rid of used to be a kind of weird red gravelly type tarmac at the side of the road. That's gone and it's now just normal tarmac. They have put a huge amount of work into making this circuit safe and acceptable to modern standards, presumably so that the event is never at risk. Because even though Le Mans is dangerous and different, it's not unacceptably dangerous. It's not like anybody looks at that and goes, we should not be doing that. You never get the discussions that you get at the Isle of Man with this event, even
Hmm.
though it is more dangerous. So I think this one's fine. This one will keep going. It is surprisingly safe for the type of circuit it is. And you can see it's like when an accident does happen due to the speeds, it can often be quite large, but the actual result of that tends to be drivers are actually okay. There's there's big runoffs, there's tech pro barriers, there's a huge amount of like different safety procedures and things like that that you don't get at other races and other series in order to keep this event running. So I think this one's fine. This one's here to stay as long as they continue this kind of march towards safety. I'm not sure how you can make the circuit much more safer than it is because quite a lot of tarmac runoff nowadays. So
we go. So let's talk about there are 15 former F1 drivers as part of the
oh,
entry list this year.
I'm gonna have to
Shall we
bring up
run
the
through
entry
them?
list now. Yeah, go
Shall
for
we
it.
run through them? So we've obviously got last year's winner, Robert Kubica,
Uh-huh.
absolute legend.
I agree with that.
We've got we've got Antonio Giovinazzi with the other Ferrari team, and then we have Kamui Kobayashi,
Mhm.
who won in 2021. Nick De Vries, Sebastian Buemi,
Yep.
Brendan Hartley, Kevin
Mhm.
Magnussen was with BMW. And then we have Will Stevens, Sebastian Bourdais, and Jack Aitken as well. And obviously we have Jack Doohan this year for the first time in LMP2
Now, am I right?
and
Do
Logan
we have
Sargent.
I was gonna say, yeah, Logan Sargent is somewhere in there as well.
Paul di Resta, Stoffel Van Dorn, Jack Doohan, Logan Sargent.
So
So
the most
it's quite a popular sort of extracurricular activity, would you say? More so for former drivers than current drivers, although I can see people like Max doing it one day.
I could see people like Max doing it one day. Nico Hulkenberg did it before whilst being an active Formula One driver and won. And obviously Fernando Alonso did it for Toyota. Am I right in thinking he was not in F1 when he did it? Was he on his
Fernando,
sabbatical?
yeah. So he left in 2018
Yep,
and also did it in
didn't want.
2018. They also did it in 2019. So one year he was in F1, the other he wasn't,
Okay,
because
gotcha.
it was Lando that replaced him in 2019 at McLaren.
So the one that we should probably talk about the most in this is Sebastian Bourdais. He wasn't a particularly successful F1 driver for lots of reasons. It was probably outside of his control. Very successful IndyCar driver, or kart as it was then, Champ Car World Series. He has been so incredibly unlucky at Le Mans. Le Mans is his place of birth. So he was born there. He has grown up with this race. But I believe that he has never won it, despite being in contention most years that he has entered, especially when he raced for Peugeot back in the late 2000s. But never won it. He has taken pole. He has taken pole and then spun on turn one of a 24-hour race, which is a little bit embarrassing, but it's kind of
Yeah,
a little bit like,
you don't want to do that.
no, exactly. So if you're looking for a feel-good story, Sebastian Bourdais one in the Cadillac would be a good one. And Jack Aitken, did you mention him in the XF1
I
driver list?
think so. Yeah, I
Because
can't remember.
he is also technically XF1 driver, isn't he? So he's in the car with Sebastian Bourdais and Earl Bamber. If you're wanting a feel-good story, that'd be a nice car to win. The 38 Cadillac run by Jota.
Yes, so let's talk about front runners and who to look out for and things like that. For those who don't know, who are the sort of the main protagonists of the 24 Hours of Le Mans, or just WEC in general?
It's kind of a funny one because this is the first year without the Penske Porsches. So we're down Porsche, so we don't get Porsche versus Ferrari for the win, which is a little bit disappointing because they have been the closest to unseating Ferrari have won the last few years. So it's kind of hard to be like, well, who's the main runners? Ferrari are the main runners. You've got 3 AF Corsa run Ferraris, 2 factory and 1, I'm going to do bunny ear quotes, private entry, which it's not. It's a factory entry. It's just yellow. But
Basically, it's just
whatever.
yellowed. Yeah.
That's Kubica's car is the private one.
Which won
Th
last year?
Yeah. So they are the front runners. They are the favourites. But with BOP, you never know. Is it, are they going to get a slightly unfavourable BOP, given that they've won the last 2 or 3 years? So who's your kind of next in line after that? It's like, well, probably Toyota. They've been here since 2016, I think. Wait, oh
That's
no,
one thing I
before
was
that,
going to say.
2012 actually for Toyota.
I tuned into Imola and the Toyotas, the BMWs, and even the Alpines were up at the sharp end, which hasn't always been the case. So it could be a sign of good things to come.
I
Peugeot
think
too.
so.
Peugeot as well.
WEC is interesting because, like you say, the BOP gets you very, very close, which is cool, fine. But then it means that the race execution is even more important But because the BOP is so close and the cars are so close, any decision made on strategy is kind of amplified because it's your one big factor now. If all the cars are performing approximately the same, then other than traffic management, your only variable is strategy. So if you get a strategy call slightly wrong, it's actually quite amplified, and you go from, I wouldn't say leading, but let's say near the front to near the back just from a bad strategy call. And similarly, good strategy calls have positive implications. So it's going to be the same at Le Mans. It's like I think everybody's going to be incredibly close, but one team getting the strategy very right and others getting it wrong will create a surprisingly large gap that nobody can close up. And when you look at it, you've got Toyota have been here since 2012. They know exactly what they're doing. Ferrari know what they're doing. They keep winning, so they must know what they're doing. WRT are running BMWs. WRT have run BMWs and Audis for decades now in sports car racing. They know exactly what they're doing. You trust those teams to make the right call almost every single time. Your roll of the dice says Peugeot don't seem to be quite on top of things as much as other teams. Alpine don't, and Genesis are brand new. So they're going to make the incorrect calls as they're learning. Fair enough. So I'd expect a split, to be honest. I'm expecting Ferrari to be at the front with Toyota not that far behind, and you've got BMWs, Cadillacs, Peugeots, and then I wouldn't be surprised if Genesis was a little bit off the back because they're new to it. This is their learning year. If we look at like LMP2, if you look down the entry list, you go like, well, is it a spec class? They're all Orica '07 chassis with a Gibson, and they've all got the same tires. The answer to that is technically no. It's not a spec class. There are actually 4 LMP2 chassis you can buy and run at Le Mans that are all legal. But the way it was introduced was the chassis manufacturers, Orica, Ligier, Riley, and who was the last one? Dallara, build their chassis, and then that's it. You're not really allowed to improve them for cost reasons. So the Orica was the best. So everybody bought the Orica. So that's what we've ended up with. So you've kind of got a spec class there, and in that makes it incredibly close. It's just like Formula 3 race or a Formula 2 race where everybody's got the same car. And yes, there are different teams that are more professional and teams that are less professional, teams that are running Orcas for the first time because they've got an invitation, things like that. But they will all tend to come out around about the same. So LMP2 will be really fun because looking at that, there is no favorite. That's just
That's
going to be
interesting.
that's just
So
going to be chaos.
they could have chosen from 4 chassis, but everybody's picked the same because it's hands and feet above the rest.
Yeah. So the
Ish.
history of that one's complicated because there was 4 chassis, and it became very, very clear even before round 1 that the Riley was not going to be in contention with the other 3. So very, very, very few teams bought a Riley. I'm talking like 1 or 2. These were shared with IMSA as well at the time because IMSA runs LMP2. So I think there was 1 Riley bought in the US and 1 bought in Europe, I think, something like that. There was a handful of Dallaras and there was a respectable amount of Ligiers, and the rest were Oricas. It became pretty clear that the Orica was the best one. So after 2-3 years, everybody had moved away from their Ligiers and Dallaras and bought an Orica because that's what you needed to compete. The ASIO did try and fix this by allowing what they called joker upgrades, where the other manufacturers would be allowed to upgrade their cars in order to meet the performance of the Orica. But if you look at that from a race team point of view, it's like, well, you've already got an Orica now, and the Dallara is now going to be improved to be the same speed as the car that you've currently got. So why would you go and spend £500,000 buying a Dallara that's hopefully as good as your Orica when you know that the Orica is definitely the best right now? So these kind of rules kind of killed the class a little bit. And we've seen similar in LMP3, which isn't at Le Mans in the 24-hour, but is in one of the support races where there was actually 4 chassis manufacturers. Might have been 3. Anyway, there was multiple chassis manufacturers. And the result was the Ligier was the best one. So everybody's bought a Ligier. And there was a Ginetta, there was another one, and there was a Duquesne, I think was the third. And nobody bought those. There was only a couple of teams ran those, realized they couldn't compete with the Ligiers, so bought the Ligiers. So the way the rules have been structured have meant that we've accidentally ended up with a spec LMP2 class where everybody has the same thing.
Which makes it interesting. But it's also strange from someone who doesn't know much about LMP2 how you've got LMP hypercar, LMP1, and GT3 using, engines and brands that we recognize, Peugeot, Cadillac, Toyota. And then you've got this middle series where it's Orica and Dallara, and just unless you're, deeply, deeply into motorsport, they're not, a customer customer brand, which is unusual.
Yeah. So what used to happen was the engines in the Orcas and the LMP2 were actually branded. So Gibson were building engines. I believe they built the ones that were branded as Nissans back when Nissan had more of a presence at Le Mans. But back then there was also a open engine formula back then. So like when we moved to this four chassis, one engine, it just became Gibson was the supplier. Before that, anybody could build an LMP2 car and anybody could build an LMP2 engine. And you, in theory, could go and pick up the Gibson engine and a different chassis and just, mash it into it and be like, cool, this is my LP2 car. Back then, you also had difference between Dunlop, Goodyear, and Michelin tires as well, whereas now it's spec as Goodyear tires. So there's an entire future episode, by the way, on what I think sports car racing should be in the regulations. There's an episode there, but it will just be me preaching for an hour, so it's maybe not the most listenable episode. And it would focus
We'll
around
put
what you
feelers out.
just said. Well, it would focus around what you just said of, do we need brands like Gibson because nobody knows who they are? And my argument would be yes, that's actually the core of sports car racing. We've actually lost a huge amount of brands through this regulation change and a huge amount of manufacturers and companies. But, is what it
Woke
is.
nonsense.
Yeah, it's these woke Frenchies that who did this, but that's kind of out of scope for this episode because, like, right now it doesn't really matter what my opinion is. The fact is, we're going to have 19 LMP2s that are all Orcas with Gibsons lining up, which, as you say, is interesting enough because it keeps it close, and that is going to be a completely chaotic class where nobody is the favorite, and you don't know who's going to win until an hour before it. And even
Am I
then,
right in
who
thinking
knows?
Jamie Chadwick is in one of those cars?
Now,
Or
I
she
don't
was
think
last year?
yeah.
No?
So I have a problem with this. Jamie Chadwick's no, I'm supporting Jamie. This is where I
Okay.
have the problem. She is not in the LMP2. She is contracted as a factory driver for Genesis. So you would think, oh, well, she'll be in the Genesis
Hypercar.
hypercar,
Yeah.
but she's not. So last year, Genesis essentially ran a handful of LMP2s in various races to prepare for running a hypercar, which makes sense. Sort your operational side whilst the car is still being built. Car arrives, you've sorted operations, you just need to learn the car now. Cool, great idea. And she raced for what was essentially the Genesis LMP2 team at the time. Then some mix-ups happened at Porsche, where Porsche did their usual annual, we're going to drop some of our factory drivers and we're going to pick up some new factory drivers, especially younger drivers. So that meant some drivers like Mathieu Jaminet and Andre Lotterer, who are sports car legends, became available. So Genesis snapped them up. And you go, well, that kind of makes sense in that you've now got two very, very highly experienced factory drivers who have had a lot of experience in sports car racing and Le Mans available. We should hire them. Good decision. But it meant Jamie Chadwick got dropped, and she is now the reserve driver. And that makes me a bit sad because I thought one of the points in this that they were hammering home is that let's get a woman in the top class of Le Mans. And I was ready for Jamie Chadwick there. And we're not getting that now. And I understand why when I look at that list, but it leaves a little bit of a sour taste because I was looking forward to that one, and we're not getting Jamie Chadwick in the
Yeah.
Genesis.
It makes sense. Like you say, it's like Cadillac getting Valtteri and Sergio, two very experienced, proven racers. But, it does mean that she's being kicked to the curb, which is a shame. I'd have liked to have seen that.
Yep, I agree with that. If anybody from Genesis PR is listening, then email us and tell us if there are plans for Jamie to be in that car either later this year or hopefully next year in a full WEC kind of program, or even if
Let's
there's
get
any.
Jamie on. I can get Jamie on. Let's do that. That's
That's
a
a much
That's a
better.
really unnecessary flex to to do while recording.
So why are we recording about Le Mans and you've got the possibility to get Jamie Chadwick on? She's not here. What are you doing?
Yeah, that's a good point. I should have probably planned that, but we can get her on, and we will.
We 100%
So
should get her on because
that will be good.
yeah, I was looking forward to her being at Le Mans, and I'm disappointed that she's not. But, is what it is. But like I say, I also understand why. When Andre Lauter, Matthew Jaminet, Daniela Giancadella are available, then, well, you kind of have to have them. You can't just be like, no, I'm not having them. So, fair, but disappointing.
It is. Do you have any closing thoughts on? I'm going to say the Isle of Man. It's not the Isle of Man. We're getting onto that. If you want to hear about the Isle of Man, listen to Arse number 7.
My closing thought on Le Mans is similar to the Nürburgring. If you've never watched it, then watch it And don't worry about the fine details too much because you'll get bogged down too much. Don't worry about what the safety car
Who's who?
regulations are. Don't worry about how these slow zones work or anything like that. It gets complicated. Just enjoy the race. Look at the timing tower and pick a car that you like and follow that. The WEC has built its own live streaming platform. They've done this for a few years now, and they're slowly creeping up to something that is actually quite good. And the new one's pretty
Hashtag
decent.
not an ad.
Yeah, this one's
Sound
not an
is
ad.
it does sound like it.
So they have a new platform called FIA Plus, which is quite good, to be fair. It does have a good live timing system. It's got all the race director messages go into it. It's pretty
Oh,
detailed.
I didn't know
It's
that.
it's the kind of live timing system that you need for an endurance race because you need to kind of sit down and commit to this event happening. It's not like an F1 race where you sit down, you watch it for 90 minutes, job done. There's a full feed of details in this. There's a map where you can see all the different positions of the cars in the circuit. The timing is quite advanced and complicated because, as you can imagine, over 24 hours, gaps get quite big and you start getting weird anomalies like, oh, we're on the same lap as the car in front, but we're 2 laps behind the car ahead and things like that. So the timing system is quite advanced. It is pretty good, to be fair. Unfortunately, it's not available on TVs, but it is available on the web. So put on your laptop and cast it to your TV or
That
work
was
out
my
a
next
way of doing
question
that.
because if that was a TV app, that would be unbelievable.
I asked them about that and they said it won't be available, but I've asked them enough that I hope I've annoyed them alone, or just me alone, to build one for next year because we've gone through this cycle with WEC where it's realized it needs its own streaming platform, but the execution has not been great. And now we're actually getting to the point where, oh, the live timing is good because if you're watching Le Mans and you've got live timing up, you're a proper motorsport nerd. Like you really want to dig into these kind of details, and the timing wasn't producing that before. Now it does, and the new streaming system is good, and it's got all the different sessions on there as well, so you'll be able to watch those. I think it's got all the support events in there as well, so you can also watch all the support events all week. Hashtag not an ad. The racing line has also got the Porsche Brazil and Ferrari Europe support events, so you can actually watch them in the racing line, but you can't watch the one on 24 hours in it. So if you want to watch it, get on FIA Plus. It is pretty good, and just sit and enjoy the kind of insanity of the event. Don't worry
Enjoy
too
the
much.
the late night commentary, which always derails. I think last year they were talking about a dead squirrel or something like that, or
There was another year they talked about cocaine,
yeah.
with to
I
the
like that a lot. I've
the
seen that, yeah.
to the horror of the co-commentator.
Mm.
So
A
yeah,
lot of fun.
oh,
So this
brilliant
this
fun.
episode was not sponsored by WEC TV Plus Prime Ultimate. What is it called? WEC Plus?
FIA Plus is the name
Yeah.
that I see in the URL there. So yeah, it's not sponsored, but if they want to sponsor, then
Yeah.
get in touch.
If they want to be involved in this absolute shit show, then
Nobody wants to be involved in our shit show. I'm amazed that anybody messages us after these. Who listens to this and
oh,
goes, "These are the people we need involved in our
these
products"?
people need informing and correcting, and I respect it. But
I mean,
you
somehow
know,
it's working for you, as we'll come on to in the arse episode in a minute. But you're making this work.
yeah, the arse episodes where I get to spread my wings because what I'm learning more and more is the technical ins and outs of events. I don't really know much about. I just enjoy watching racing and for what it is. So when it comes to like the technical regs and the BOP and things like that, I'm clocked out.
But isn't that the way it should be, really? I
Maybe,
mean, maybe
maybe.
that's the point the ACO were trying to make by saying we're not going to publish the BOP tables. Maybe the point is you shouldn't actually have to worry about the technical side of it or the fine details. You should just turn on the TV and enjoy the event, or turn up at Le Mans and enjoy the event. Maybe that is actually the correct way of looking at motorsport.
So sadly, neither of us will be at Le Mans this year, for the 24 hours at least. Uh,
Yeah, hopefully get there later this year for a different event, but that is TBA or
yes,
TBC,
yeah, TBC,
TBD.
TBA, TBD. But we'll leave that there. Uh,
Nope, that's all I've got. We'll see you in the next episode, which is arse.
yeah, subscribe to Dave's app, buy my magazine. All the Le Mans timings will be on there. Is that right, Dave?
Yeah, the way you worded that, I was like, "Have you got the Le Mans timings in your magazine?" I please don't do that. You'll steal my customers. But yeah, the
Yeah,
entire
yeah.
Le
So
Mans
I'm getting all the
24-hour schedule.
timings, copy and
It,
pasting from Dave's app and putting them in the magazine.
all the timings are in the racing line app, including all the support series. because it's odd support series this year. Got Le Mans Cup, which we've always got as a support series, but we've got Ferrari Challenge Europe, which kind of makes sense. We've also got Porsche Carrera Cup Brazil as a support
Doesn't make
series.
sense.
Doesn't make sense, but I'm here for it. And you can watch those races in the racing line, but you can get the timings for every single session in your time zone in the app, as always.
There we go. Short and sweet. Thank you very much, Dave.
Cool.
Catch you in the next one.
See you soon.
Slack, 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 slack.